Hey, cut it out.
Yeah.
Hey.
That's good.
Okay. In life, we need protection from danger. This is obvious. In ancient times, people protected themselves from danger by wearing a helmet or wearing armor, carrying a shield. In today's world, people wear hard hats on the building sites, construction, police wearing bulletproof vests. So there's all sorts of form of protection. Well, that's protection that is physical, from physical danger. But of course there are other dangers, such as not having any money. And so we're worried about the danger of losing our home or losing our job, which is, I think, more apparent. And so people have insurance, investment plans, health. What about health? We have to deal with that as the danger of falling sick in many ways. So these are things that we take for granted because we have to do it. It's a part of life. But in the spiritual life, as opposed to the physical life, this life, everything is based on trust in God. Not life insurance policies, not bulletproof vests, but it's in trust in God. And as the holy prophet David says from Psalm 124, "They that put their trust in the Lord shall be even as Mount Zion, which may not be moved, but standeth fast forever." So in Jerusalem there is Mount Zion, that God has said it's holy, it will be there forever. It's interesting to note that before people lived there, it was just a rocky mound. And people started to live there and they started to create gardens. I don't know the details, but I imagine they imported some soil. And now it's very luxurious. We say verdant, meaning very green in English. Verdant, and it's rich. And I think that is a symbolism of trusting in God. When we trust in God, then we become like Mount Zion. First of all, we cannot be moved, and we last forever. And also our life is full of virtue, of blessings. So it's prosperous. It's not some sort of stony mount when we start trusting in God. And St. Paul says, "Let us hold the profession of faith without wavering." Now this is very important. If we're going to trust in God, we cannot be doubtful or worried or, well, what if? I always say to you that what if should be taken out of your vocabulary. No such thing. Not what if, it's what God will give. We have to learn to live by that. It's not easy, it's scary for all of us, and there's no exceptions. Let us hold the profession of faith, what we believe, without wavering, without being scared. I'm trying to think of how to explain wavering. Cast not away your confidence, which brings great reward. And this is what I want to talk about. We have to have confidence and trust in God. We have confidence that God will protect me. He will look after me. Now, he may not look after me the way that I want to be looked after, and this is a different thing. And we know, and St. Paul says it's a terrible thing to fall into the hands of the living God. If you're going to go into a cave to meet God, you're not going to meet that little pussycat out there. You're going to meet a tiger. And your whole world will be thrown upside down. But that's what we have to trust in God. We have to have confidence. Now, St. John Tobolsk, he says that this confidence in faith has 5 rewards. 5 rewards. And I want to mention those. Right, the first one is those who trust God are never put to shame. Never put to shame. When we trust in God, then things begin to work according to God's plan. As I say, not to our plan necessarily, but to God's plan. And so we have to trust and have confidence and we're never put to shame. On the opposite, if we hope in a man or in people, we're going to be disappointed. Now, we all have experience of that, everybody. I'm sure everybody here in this room has had that experience. We trust somebody and they let you down. Maybe not deliberately. I'm not saying that people have evil intent, but you can't trust people because they're human. So what do we do then? Well, obviously we must learn to love and trust people, but this can only happen when we trust God. Then we have a different view of people, and we can see things, and we can say, well, I can trust that person. Also, we can see that somebody's weak and can't be trusted, which is not sin, but is a weakness in the person. And how many times have you been disappointed by people? I don't know about you, but many times. And the disappointment comes from very strange places where you wouldn't think that you would be let down. But when I think about it, in retrospect, over the years, I realise that people are weak. I'm weak. Am I trustworthy? Well, I haven't been put to the test yet, so I hope I am. But no, we're all guilty of that, not to be trusted. And even Plato, the philosopher, said, do not hope in men. He said that those he says, if you hope in people, trust in people, you're like somebody, it is sleep for those who are awake. It is sleep for those who are awake. Somebody's active and lively, and this trusting in somebody takes away everything, takes off the edge of everything that you're doing. Yeah? I'm not trying to say to you mustn't trust people, but you have to trust God first. And when you start trusting God and have confidence in God, then you begin to be able to trust people. And it's a two-way process. I think if you trust somebody else, it actually helps them. Plato said that if you trust in men, it will dull your senses. But you trust in God, it's the opposite. Inspiration. There's an excitement there, almost adventure in one's relationship in God when you start trusting, because everything comes from God. Everything. We have to have that confidence. But unfortunately, when things go wrong, we're looking for physical relief. Just in case, I better put that by, just in case. And I was brought up to be thrifty and to save and not to spend money too much, which of course I ignored in my youth, but I was taught that. Now I'm not so sure. You shouldn't be careless and say, oh, it doesn't matter, I don't need money, don't need food, somebody will feed me. No, you have to use a little bit of common sense that goes with it. But if you trust in God, then you'll have wisdom and know how to deal with things. In Wisdom, the book of Wisdom, it says, for the hope of the ungodly, those who do not trust in God, is like smoke, dust driven by the wind. It's not solid, it's not substantial. It's like smoke, it's like dust. This is hope in ungodly. In other words, people who don't believe in God. Mainly, that's what it really means. And in the Wisdom of Sirach, this is from the apocryphal books, it says, here's a question, were any confounded who trusted in God? Were any confounded? Were any put to shame who trusted in God? This is the prophet asking. And he's saying that, woe to the faint-hearted, they shall not be defended. So if we don't trust in God and we become faint-hearted, we will not be defended. We will not be defended against danger. We'll have no protection. We're not protected. But when we start trusting in God, then we have that protection. Now that's just one reward. Never to be put to shame. The second reward is, believe this or not, a peaceful life free from anxiety. Who would like a life like that? Put your hands up. That is a reward for trusting in God. The second reward. First is that you will not be disappointed, shame, and the second one is that you will live a peaceful life. Now, what does it mean by peaceful life? I think it's different for each person. It's not being annoyed by people. I don't know what pictures one has in mind of a peaceful life. But it's granted to us if we trust in God, because we're not faced by anything. Something goes wrong, oh well, never mind. It's in God's hands. We don't like it. It's not a question that you like it or why I love your suffering. No, that's crazy. It's called masochism. And we as Orthodox Christians are not masochists. But we accept suffering. We don't like it, but if it's in God's plan and that we have to go through it, then that's what we do. Psalm 30. In thee, O Lord, have I put my trust. Let me never be put to confusion. Remember when the Israelites were leaving Egypt and they came to the Red Sea, and there's a sea in front of them, and they're being pursued by Pharaoh and all his chariots and his army, and what are they going to do? Well, Moses, trusting in God, knew that God would help them. How? Didn't know, but then he said, obviously was inspired to bless the water. We say it's almost a sign of a cross. It's that way, and the waters parted and they crossed. A miracle, impossible, physically, but happened. And on the other side, he then made the other side with his staff, which makes the sign of the cross, and the waters closed over Pharaoh and all his army. Trust in God. I wonder what people were thinking at that time, standing by the water, saying, "No, we've come this far. Now we're going to be killed because we can't go any further. We can't swim it." And all these chariots come in, and then at the last minute, I say last minute, Moses trusts in God, and God works a miracle. That can happen to us. But you won't know until you trust God and try it. Put your faith in God and let God take over. Woe to the faint-hearted, for they shall not be defended. If they'd been faint-hearted and didn't trust God, and Moses said, "Well, I think I made a mistake here, sorry about that," they would have been destroyed. They would have perished. So, first one is never put to shame. You can never be disappointed. Second reward is a peaceful life free from anxiety. Psalm 12, I have put my trust in thy mercy. And I would say that when we're going through this period of anxiety and worry, which we all do, we should read these Psalms. And if you're really having a bad bout of anxiety, then read these particular Psalms, 124, 30, I can give you those later, on a daily basis. It covers everything that you need to know. Because sometimes we want to pray about it, but we don't know what to say. Some people ask me, well, what prayers should I use? Well, Jesus' prayer, of course, is the basis of everything. But these Psalms would be very helpful to read. When in doubt, read these Psalms daily. This is the note I made. Yes, consecrate your work to God, because all things work together for good to them that love God. This is St. Paul in Romans. Consecrate your work. And that means that can be in the home as well, not just a professional job, but at home. Consecrate it to God. Then things will have a different perspective. You will see things in a different way. There's a wonderful poem, I think, by George Herbert, in which one of the phrases is that if you have trust in God, he says, if you have this as a rule of life, even sweeping can be divine. Can be a beautiful act, even sweeping the floor. And I think that's amazing how everything can be consecrated to God. Consecrated to God. 3, the third reward. There are 5, the 3. Number 3, strength in endurance. Oh, well, that's a relief. So when you start trusting in God, then you get strength to be able to trust God. That's a sort of bonus, isn't it? And trust in God, and you know that you will not be disappointed. You know that you will be free from anxiety, though you don't believe it till it happens. because all the stress of life, but it's true. And the third one is that you have strength in endurance, so that you can actually do it. And you can refer to that in Proverbs 10:26, which I didn't actually write out. Blessed Theodoret says, have God as your teacher and master in all things. Thousands upon thousands of saints have done this. So they have endured, they've been given strength from God to endure, and they have seen God as their teacher and master in all things. All things means all things, not in some particular area or some skill, but in everything. And Saint Eusebius, no, it's not Saint Eusebius. Eusebius, the historian, marvelled at the way people went to be martyred. When he was in Egypt, he said Christians were running to be martyred, and they're trying to who was going to the first one to get there to be martyred. An enthusiasm, trusting God because they knew that they would be going to eternal life. I can't imagine that actually. It's amazing. Running to be martyred. And as he says, and it was a new phenomenon, unheard of in times before Christ. And this is why Eusebius, the historian, was in Egypt. St. John Chrysostom says, trust, and that's trusting God, is an unconquerable mountain. So he's probably referring back to Mount Zion from the scripture. Trusting God is like an unconquerable mountain. You can't, it says, dig it out. In other words, you can't destroy it. You can get a tribe, but you can't kill them. You can't destroy the mountain. This is you trusting God. Because once you start trusting in God, nothing can get at you. This is the amazing thing. Nothing. We will not be ashamed. So there's never put to shame. 2, the peaceful life free from anxiety. 3, strength in endurance. 4, protection from falling into sin. Protection from falling into sin. The fathers say, don't desire that which is not permissible. And I think that's a very simple answer to that. Don't desire what is not permissible. And I think this is a problem because we begin to dream about things in fantasy and it becomes, the demons take over and so it becomes sinful. But we should, when we have a desire for something which is sinful, or not permissible, which is sinful, we must cut off that desire. And when we trust in God, that He's guiding our life daily, every moment of the day, then we will be protected from falling into sin. And everything we do will be in accordance with God's will. It will become incorporated into one's being. Trusting in God will be who we are. The way we think, the way who we are, this is trusting in God. A living example. Whatever we do is the will of God. How fantastic that would be. How wonderful. Have your will conforming to the will of God. Everything that you do. So we should do nothing, I would say, without cross ourselves. We don't cross ourselves enough, says Matrona, she's right. And in every opportunity we have, we should be blessing our work. Now I think is when you work with food, I mean, I make prostra for the altar. And so I said the Jesus prayer, I make the prostra. And I bless the flour. And this is something everybody should be doing. I don't mean making the prostra, I mean blessing the food when you're cooking, make it a prayer. Every little opportunity to be able to use a prayer for this. Cross yourself when you go out the door. Make it a habit. It's what you do. And then we're open to God's will in all things. Protection from falling into sin. How important that is. And he says, if you lack will and confidence, you trust in God's will. My will is weak, but God's will is strong. So that's what we have to trust in. Don't trust in your own will, because you'll be beaten easily, tempted. But we have to trust in God's will. And I would say about confidence, we will have confidence. I don't know why I made a note here, but I think I'll tell you that it's a little bit embarrassing. I was giving a recital. I was playing the viola, and somehow I got hit with a fear. I've never. Well, when I was little, I could understand that. You know, having to stand up in front of the class. You know, you're feeling nervous. But this was actually almost physical. In fact, I couldn't play. It got worse because here I'm going to play at a recital, and my hands are wet with perspiration, and I stopped and I put some French chalk powder on them to dry them. Didn't help really. And then I felt that I couldn't play because there was this powder in the way, and then my bow arm started to tremble, so I couldn't play. I'm like, you know, it'd been all right if it had been a comedy act, but I was so embarrassed and I had to stop and give up. Okay. I actually gave up music shortly after that, not because of that incident, by the way. Now that was a big shock to my pride, my ego, because there I was going to perform and I got a nervous fit, which was physical. I don't know whether you've experienced that. You don't have to admit to it, but it's, you know, sometimes bouncing bow, as I call it, but I confess it to you. Okay, I'm on YouTube. But it's a part of, you know, the struggle where it's, well, who has confidence? If you have too much confidence, it's called pride. But when we trust God, then we'll have a different type of confidence. I was trying to perform and obviously to please people and make an impression. And I lost my confidence. In church, serving in liturgy, I'm not trying to impress anybody. Well, I'm trying to do what God wants. And Ken and I, you know, together we do what we can. And God is merciful. So 1 is never put to shame. 2, a peaceful life free from anxiety. Is that possible? 3, endurance. 4, protection from falling into sin. And 5, the 5th, trust can make us seem invincible. And as St. Paul says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. It is God. If God is for us, who can be against us? And that applies to everyone here. When we start trusting in God, then we will become invincible. And nobody will be able to take our faith from us because we have this absolute trust. We can remember the martyrs every day in the Maeneium. We read about terrible suffering of martyrs, doing this for God, for Christ's sake. So, and they trusted with their lives. So I think the least we can do is at least to begin. And if we can't, or if we find it difficult, which we will, then let's read these Psalms that I've mentioned. Now I'll finish with those Psalms. A verse from them. They that put their trust in the Lord shall be even as Mount Zion, which may not be removed, but stands fast forever. I have put my trust in thy mercy. In thee, O Lord, have I put my trust. Let me never be put to confusion. And then finally with St. Paul's exclamation, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That's where his strength comes from. If God is for us, who can be against us?